Hi everyone, good afternoon and welcome to our webinar on Introduction to CSR. Thank you so much or to all of you for joining us this afternoon, and it's so lovely to see so many of you here. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce both of our speakers for today. Our speakers for today are Winnie Dholakia, who is the director at Help Your NGO, and Nishant Parekh, who is head of research and advisory services at Help Your NGO. Both our speakers are chartered accountants with over 5 years of experience with Help Your NGO. And prior to that, both of them have several years of experience in the industry. Without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to both Winnie and Nishant. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Aditi. And hello, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar hosted by Help Your NGO. Now, before we start with our session, let me browse you through a brief presentation on the work we do at Help Your NGO and our objectives. Our founders, Ajit, Subbu, and Rahul, have founded companies which have helped investors make educated investment decisions. It was in 2000 when they decided to use their skill sets to bring transparency to the social sector and founded Help Your NGO. Now, let's talk about why is there a need for transparency. As you can see, of the 3.3 million Indian NGOs, less than 10% file their annual returns. Also, over 50% of the NGOs registered under FCRA have lost their license due to non-compliance with the FCRA rules. Hence, there is a need for transparency, and which is where we come in. Help Your NGO helps donors make informed donation decisions by giving them access to standardized information on over 650 Indian NGOs across 14 UN SDGs, 504 zip codes, and 13 sectors. Since inception, we have raised over 7 crore rupees for our NGO partners by connecting donors with credible NGOs which met their unique giving criteria. Now, moving on to our objectives. Apart from increasing transparency and helping donors make informed donation decisions, we also aim at giving smaller NGOs the same visibility as the larger ones. So we recognize that in the public eye, obviously the larger nonprofits are going to gain more visibility and thus draw more donations. But we are here to neutralize that. Our USP is that Help Your NGO is the only organization in India standardizing financial and program information of over 650 NGOs. For every NGO registered on our platform, our research analysts arrive at the percentage spent on beneficiaries, which is our USP. Now, what does this percentage indicate? It is the total direct spend on beneficiaries after excluding admin and other expenses. We've observed that users of our website find this feature extremely useful in making the donation decision. We also have an NGO search and compare function, which enables donors to look for NGOs to support based on their specific giving criteria, like UN SDG, states, sectors, and several others. On this slide, you see a list of our products and services. We'll be explaining our CSR consultancy services for both NGOs and corporates in the latter half of this webinar. Here, we have shared names of some of our corporate partners and clients. Now, let's move on to why we all have gathered here today, which is to understand the concept of corporate social responsibility, that is CSR, and the rules governing it. Over to you, Nishant.
Thank you, Winnie. Let's start with the definition first and understanding what the concept of CSR is all about. Next slide, please. Right. So in the words of Howard Barban, who's widely regarded as the father of modern CSR, corporate social responsibility is the obligation of businessmen to pursue those policies, to make those decisions, and to follow those lines of actions which are desirable in terms of the objectives and overall values of a society. Right? Like we can make out from the other two definitions that are given on the screen, a common point which comes out is the emphasis on building the local community as well as contributing positively to society. Now, this was the definition. Let us understand what CSR as a concept stands for. Right. So CSR now is a very, very integral part of business, right? And the call to action should come from the top management for this. It involves making the core business functions of the company sustainable, right? And measuring the impact the actions of the company has on society. Besides this, it is also important that the company evaluates the policies and practices, draft such policies and implement such practices, and see the impact that it has on the society at large. Now, involvement of stakeholders, all stakeholders, is a very, very essential component of CSR. And this not only just includes the shareholders, but also other people such as the employees of the organization, the customers, the government authorities, and so on. Now, one concept that CSR really focuses on is that the accountability of the company is to its stakeholders and not just its shareholders. So this is really crucial to know. And now if we talk in the Indian context, then it is nothing but an obligation to spend money towards doing social good. Next, please. Right. So talking about the PBL, or a triple bottom line approach of CSR, that refers to the 3 Ps, which is people, planet, and profit. And they work also in the same order, where people are always prioritized. They come at the top. Now, like we know that people are the lifeblood of any organization. And when we talk of people, it doesn't just include the organization's employees, but also those such as its customers and the people in the local community whom the organization is coming in contact with. Right. So when we talk of a sustainability development with respect to people, it means that the organization should focus on such activities that enhances the standard of living and improves the lives of the people it is associated with. The second P that we have is the planet. Planet refers to the environment in which the organization operates. Again, here, the endeavor should be to try and reduce the damage that the organization is causing to the environment. And the last P that we have stands for profit. Now, profit till not so long ago used to be the only bottom line for most of the organizations. However, now organizations have widened their horizon. And when we talk of profit, it refers to the impact the organization has on the economy. And when we talk of economy, it is not just the local economy, but also the national economy as well as the global economy. And this will be measured in terms of the livelihood opportunities created, the tax that is paid to the government, the new innovative measures that were supported, the wealth generated, and so on. Next, please. Right. Now, let us see what are the common examples or common practices that companies can adopt on an ongoing basis, right? So first, of course, is adhering to environmentally conscious policies. Thereafter, the company should strive to reduce its carbon footprints, practice improved labor practices and fair trade, encourage community volunteering, as well as practice charitable giving. Now, these are all practices which company can anyway do, irrespective of whether it falls under the gambit of CSR or not. Next, please. Right. So now let us try and understand the difference between CSR and donation. Although the two terms are widely changed interchangeably and used interchangeably, but the thing is there is still a stark difference between the two, right? So while donation is a voluntary act, and it can either be a one-time activity in the form of issuing a check, or it could be on an activity which is done on ongoing basis. In the Indian context, CSR is mandated by law, and it is targeted social spending for a particular project, which is covered under Schedule 7 of the Companies Act. It is a lot more strategic than what donation is, right? So in terms of donation, when we say I've donated money or I'm doing a donation, usually the implication of the outflow is in terms of financial contribution. But CSR is a much broader concept. It involves not just outflow of financial resources, but also commitment of time and other resources. Now, donation is a relatively smaller concept and has a limited scope, whereas CSR has a much broader scope since it seeks to solve and address those issues, right, which the community is facing at its local level. Like I just covered, the donation may or may not be recurring in nature. It could probably be a one-time activity, or it could be something like a festive giving that a person wants to do. Whereas CSR is usually long-term in nature, and it is an ongoing process. It is, like we see, it's a hands-on approach to solving crucial problems that the society is facing. Whereas donation is not necessarily seeking at solving a long-term problem, but it is something that is more short-term in nature. Next slide, please. So just to add over here, we can say that not all CSR is donation, and not all donation is CSR. Right. Now, let us just see what is the global overview on CSR, right? So emphasis globally is on creating a synergy between the company's core business operations and its philanthropic efforts, right? So, by and large, business houses are encouraged to carry, to practice such practices and to take on such activities that do not cause harm to the society. So long as your activities are not adversely affecting the society, it is really fine. Now, what happens is, when we have such liberal guidelines or such broad parameters, the company has a liberty to align its strategic operations with its area of expertise, right? So usually it is not uncommon to see companies doing its CSR or channelizing its philanthropic efforts in an area in which it has expertise. All right. Now, we know that close to around 70 odd countries globally have some or the other form of CSR guidelines or some form or the other form of reporting respect to CSR, right? So countries like say South Africa, France, Denmark, China, they have laws pertaining to how the reporting on CSR is to be done, right? But they do not have any laws mandating spending on CSR or how the CSR is to be practiced. So we can conclude that CSR, though systematically encouraged globally, is not made mandatory, right? It's not mandatory anywhere except in one country, which is India. Now, let us look at the journey or evolution of CSR in India, right? So CSR in India has traditionally been doing philanthropic activities. And, if we can relate to Mahatma Gandhi's concept of trusteeship in this context, right? It is just a modern version of CSR. It's a modern world CSR. Okay, so when we talk about evolution of CSR, right? So in 2009, we had the corporate voluntary guidelines that were released to encourage companies in achieving high standards of corporate governance. Thereafter, in 2012, we had the business responsibility reports, wherein SEBI mandated the top 100 companies as per market cap to file the BRR based on their national voluntary guidelines. Then we had the breakthrough year in 2015, wherein it was mandated by Act Section 135 was implemented to the Companies Act, and CSR came into force. Thus, India became the first country which mandated spending on CSR. Thereafter, we've had several high-level committee reports, and amendments have come into picture. Now, when we talk about CSR in global context and CSR in Indian context, one thing that we need to know is, globally, companies have to ensure that their activities do not damage the environment. Whereas in the Indian context, the companies need to obviously ensure that their activities are not damaging the environment. But at the same time, they also have an obligation to spend money additionally, whereas the foreign companies do not have to do this. That is one major difference between India and the rest of the countries with respect to CSR. Now, let us look at the broad framework or the legal framework which govern the provisions of CSR, right? So we have Section 135 under the Companies Act. We have Schedule 7 of the Companies Act, with by and large covers most of the activities that are eligible for CSR. And we also have the Company CSR Policy Rules 2014. Now we'll study the provisions, the important provisions. We'll try and cover, we'll highlight on what the important provisions are under each of these sections. Next, please. Right. So let us focus on the applicability of CSR, right? So Section 135(1) of the Companies Act says that which are the companies who have to undertake CSR, provided they meet some criteria. So all companies, right? All companies registered in India are covered under this act. And in case of foreign companies, any branch or project office of a foreign company in India is also covered. Right. Thereafter, let us look at the criteria which attracts the provisions of CSR, right? So like we can see, Section 131 of the Companies Act says that if a company satisfies any one of the following condition also during the immediately preceding financial year, then the provisions of CSR will be attracted. Now, the provisions are, what are the three triggers that we need to look for? One is a turnover. So turnover should be, if the turnover is greater than or equal to 1,000 crores, if the net worth is greater than or equal to 500 crores, or if the net profit is greater than or equal to 5 crores, then the provisions of CSR will be attracted and the company will be obligated to spend money. Now let us look at an example over here, right? We've seen that all companies, that is all Indian companies, have to undertake CSR. So let us look at a tricky scenario wherein, there usually is confusion as to what happens in case of a holding company and a subsidiary company. So let us take an example. We have a company A, which is the holding company, to whom the CSR rules are not applicable, as in none of the three triggers that we just saw in the previous slide are affected in the current year or are hit in the current year. Then we have its subsidiary, company B, right, to whom at least one of the triggers have been attracted. That is, the company will now have to undertake CSR, activities and spend money on it. So now in this scenario, what happens? Simply because company B, which is a subsidiary of company A, has attracted the provisions of section 135, is company A, by nature of being the parent company or the holding company, also liable to undertake CSR activities? The answer is no. Each company has to be considered on a standalone basis, and the relation it has with its subsidiary company or its holding company will have no importance or no relevance over here. Now, likewise, let us take another example. So in the same company, let us assume company A also attracts the provisions of CSR rules. That is, it also has to undertake CSR activities, right? Say its net profit has been 7 crores in the previous year. So it has to undertake CSR activities in this year. And company B also has attracted similar provision. Now, if company A fulfills it or discharges its obligation towards CSR, can company B also say that no, the parent company has discharged their share of obligation, so that covers us also? We are not obligated to spend any more money on CSR? The answer again is no. Each company will have to be considered on a case-to-case basis or on a standalone basis. Moving on. Right. So we've seen when the companies have to spend. Now let us see how much they have to spend, right? So as per section 135(5) of the Companies Act, the minimum amount to be spent by companies in a financial year has been prescribed. And that amount is how much? That is 2% of the average net profit of the company in the 3 immediately preceding financial years. The law again is silent on the maximum amount that is to be spent. So there is no upper limit. It is entirely at the company's discretion. Now, I think this is a really good measure taken by the government in not having an upper cap, for the simple reason that, see, the whole point of CSR is that the company should fulfill its social obligations, right? We should not restrict it to just 2% of the average net profit. Now, in case my obligations are more and which requires me spending beyond that 2%, then I will definitely incur more than 2%. It is not mandatory, but it is suggested that the company should take care of its social obligations as well. Now, let us take another example. It has been said that company has to undertake, has to spend 2% of its average net profits of the immediately 3 preceding financial year. Now, let us take first scenario. What happens when a company does not have profit in any of the 3 years or in any of the 1 year? So out of the 3 years, there's a loss in 1 year and there's a profit in the other 2 years. So do we not consider that year at all? Or does the company not have to undertake CSR activities? What happens in such a case? Here again, it has been clarified that the word to be considered is the average net profit. So if the average amount that we get after adding the profits of 2 years and setting off the loss of 1 year, if that is positive, then the company will have to undertake CSR activities to the extent of 2% of this net profit. All right. Now let us consider another situation. What if a company is newly incorporated? It doesn't have a track record of 3 immediately preceding financial years. So what happens in that case? Again, there's a clarification which has been issued that in such a scenario, the company will consider the average net profit of the completed financial years. So for example, if the company has been in existence for only 2 completed financial years, then the net profit, average net profit of those 2 financial years only has to be considered for the purpose of arriving at the amount of CSR. Next slide, please. Right. Now let us look at how can the amount be spent, right? So what are the type of expense on which it can be spent? So one is outflow. So CSR, the law is very clear. It says that amount has to be spent. Company has to spend 2% of its average net profit, right? So it's a very broad term. So company can either make payment in the nature, which is in the nature of capital expense. So say, for example, company may want to construct a school, right? We've erected a building and we've created a school for children over there in a village. Will the expense incurred in construction of building qualify for CSR? The answer is yes. Now let us take another scenario. Suppose a building is already there, but they do not have the funds to pay salary to the teachers or to the caretakers or provide stationery or education kit to the students. So if the company is bearing this operating cost or the cost of running the program or maintaining the program, will this expense qualify as CSR? The answer again is yes. And let's take a third scenario. Suppose a donor is directly donating money to the corpus of an organization or an NGO. Does that qualify as CSR? The answer again is yes. Next slide, please. Right. Now let us see how should the company discharge its obligation, right? So we know that company has to spend money. We also know that what are the triggers that attract the the provisions of CSR. And now let us see how is this money to be spent, right? So one is company can either undertake CSR activity on its own. The other option that the company has is by setting up a foundation of its own, right? So company can set up a Section 8 company, a trust, or a society registered under the Societies Registration Act 1860. Now this is nothing but a foundation that the company has created. It's very common in India. We've seen so many large companies like Reliance, Nestle, Ambuja Cements. They have their own foundation through which they undertake CSR activities, right? So that is one option available to the company. The second option that they have is they can do the same thing, right, through a Section 8 company, trust, or a society which has been created under law, right, either by the government or the parliament or the state legislature. Now, the third option available to the company is to have a third party as an implementing agent. All right. So this could again be a Section 8 company. It could be a registered trust, or it could be a society. Now, one important point to keep in mind over here is that such a company should have a 3-year track record in the activity that it proposes to undertake, right? Now, we need to understand that this rule or this criteria is applicable only if the company is appointing a third party as an implementing agent. If it is doing through its own foundation, then the company need not have a 3-year track record, right? And we know that with effect from 1st April, just we've got some recent amendments with effect from 1st April, all of these implementing partners, the Section 8 company, trust, or society, in addition to having a 3-year track record, will also require themselves to be registered with the central government, right? They will have to obtain a unique CSR registration number, right? In addition to this, they will also need to mandatorily have 12A and ATG. Now, one other option that is available for the company to discharge its CSR obligation is to collaborate with other companies and execute or implement programs. Now, again, there was a bit of confusion over here whether it can be done or it shouldn't be done, but there has been a clarification issued, and it is said that if the company or the board is convinced that they can report separately on the program that they're taking up collectively, then there is no harm in going ahead with this arrangement. So as long as I'm convinced that even though we are 3 partners or two companies undertaking a program together, as long as I'm able to report separately on my share of donation or contribution, I can undertake such a collaboration. Moving on. Okay. So we have Schedule 7 of the Companies Act, which specifies what are the activities that qualify for CSR, right? So by and large, all the activities. So we need to know that these are just very, very broad framework, which more or less covers almost all kinds of activities that a company can undertake. So what you see in the center is a summary of the activity that has been prescribed by law under Schedule 7. And what you see on the right is the UN SDG. So we've tried to correlate the UN Sustainable Development Goal, about which Vinny will be covering more in subsequent slides. And we've tried to link it to the Schedule 7 activities. So the first one, of course, is spending on health or eradication of hunger, poverty, and malnutrition. Any expense incurred on promotion of education also qualifies for CSR activities. Activities incurred for activities undertaken for promotion of gender equality, women empowerment, as well as ensuring environmental sustainability, protection of national heritage, arts and culture. All of these qualify as CSR activities. Right. Besides these, we've also got activities that are undertaken for measures of benefit of the armed force veterans and their dependents, training to promote sports, rural development projects that are undertaken by the company, contribution to funds such as the PM National Relief Fund or such specified funds, and funds provided to technology incubators such as IITs, right, who are associated with academic institutions. So these are by and large the main activities that qualify for CSR. Now let us have a look at the exclusion list or the activities that do not qualify for CSR. So this is covered under Rule 2 of the company CSR Rules 2014. The first one is any activity undertaken by a company in its normal course of business. So if it is something that the company is anyway doing or is anyway supposed to do, then such an activity would not qualify as CSR. However, again, there has been a clarification or a recent amendment in this. It says that any company which is in the business of developing or which is in the business of research and development to develop a vaccine, right, or medical kit, if it undertakes such activity for the purpose of COVID-19, then such amount incurred or such expenditure incurred would qualify as CSR. Now, again, our understanding is that this is a short-term measure to overcome the crisis, the pandemic crisis that globally all of us are fighting together, because the provision such exclusion has been covered only for a period of 3 financial years, starting from FY21, right? So for FY21, FY22, and FY23, a company which is engaged in such research and development, right, of a vaccine or a medical toolkit, the amount they spend will be considered as a will qualify as a CSR activity, even though that is their normal business activity. All right, so the second activity that we have in the exclusion list is activities undertaken outside India. So for an activity to qualify as a CSR activity, it definitely has to be undertaken in India. However, if any activity is undertaken to support a sportsman in terms of providing training to him abroad, outside India, and such sportsman is representing India either at a national level or international level, then the amount spent abroad on the training of such sports person will again qualify as CSR. Right? So we need to keep in mind two things. One is that the training has taken place abroad, even though it's taken place abroad. And second thing is he should be a national level or an international level sports person. The next exclusion we have is any kind of a sponsorship that has been undertaken for deriving benefits for its own products or services, such as you sponsor awards, you have campaigns or advertising expenses that companies incur. So that will not be considered as CSR. Again, activities that benefit employees of the company will not be considered. There again has been an amendment in this. Earlier, it used to be employees as well as their families. And the criteria for not qualifying as a CSR activity was if they were the majority recipient of the benefits at the service or the CSR activities that were being undertaken by the company. However, with the recent amendment, what happens is the family has been excluded. So even if a company is undertaking activities, CSR activities, and it is benefiting some or all of the employees of the children or employees of the children or family members of the employee, then that will still qualify as CSR activity. But even if it benefits some percentage of the employees, then the entire activity will not, or the expense incurred will not qualify as CSR. So there won't be any pro rata basis or proportion. So say 20% are company's employees, remaining 80% are local community members. So suppose you've spent 10 CR. So out of 10 CR, 20 CR won't qualify as CSR, rest 8 CR will qualify. No such things doing. No pro rata basis. If employees are benefiting, then that activity is totally excluded. Moving on, any contribution made to a political party or any expense incurred to comply with the requirement of any act or statute or regulation will again not be considered for the purpose of CSR. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've seen that a company has to spend a minimum of 2% of its average net profits on activities qualifying for CSR. Now, what happens when the company is unable to spend such amount or doesn't spend such amount, right? So here, let's consider two scenarios. One, in case a company has ongoing project, and the other when the company doesn't have an ongoing project. So when a company has an ongoing project and it has some unspent at the end of the financial year, as on 31st March, then the company is obligated to transfer the amount to a separate account with a scheduled bank called as the unspent CSR account. And this transfer has to be made within 30 days from the end of 31st March or the end of the financial year. Now, once the money has been transferred to the scheduled bank, right, the company already has ongoing projects. So what the company has to do or can do is utilize this amount, right, for the project. And the company can utilize this amount up to a period of 3 years. So after transferring the money, the company has a time limit of 3 years to utilize the unspent amount. Even after the end of 3 years, if the company is unable to spend some or entire amount, then the amount remaining unspent will have to be transferred to a fund specified in Schedule 7 of the Act within 30 days from the date of completion of the third financial year. Right? So there are two steps over here. First is if there's an unspent in the current year and we have an ongoing project, then okay, you just have to open a separate bank account and you have the liberty to utilize that amount towards your ongoing programs. And you have a period of 3 years. Despite of that, if you're unable to do or utilize the funds, then you mandatorily have to transfer it to a fund specified in Schedule 7. Now, when we talk of fund specified in Schedule 7, what does it include? Of course, the list is available online, but typically it is those funds set up by a central government for the socio-economic benefit of scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, minorities, tribals, and so on, right? Okay. Now, let us look at a scenario where the company doesn't have any ongoing project. It has an unspent as on 31st March, but there's no ongoing project. So in this scenario, there's no point of opening a separate account with the scheduled bank and all that. We directly transfer the funds to the funds specified in Schedule 7. All right, moving on. Now let us see what happens when we spend more than what we were supposed to spend, right? We've seen in earlier slides that the law is silent about what is on the maximum cap or the upper limit in terms of the CSR spending. Now, if the CSR expense incurred by a company in a particular financial year is more than the prescribed amount, that is more than the 2%, then such excess amount can be set off against the CSR expenditure that the company may have to incur in the immediately succeeding 3 financial years. Right? So the company has the option of setting this off against its future liabilities of the succeeding 3 financial years. However, this is subject to 2 conditions. The first is the excess amount that is available should not have arisen on account of surplus. It should not have arisen as a surplus on account of any CSR activities that the NGO has taken up. Right? Now, suppose a company is supporting a program, and as a byproduct of the program, there is some income which has been generated. So such an income cannot be carried forward. Okay. And the second criteria that needs to be fulfilled to carry forward this amount is that it should be passed by the board. The board needs to approve it by way of a resolution. Next, please. Now let us see what happens when there is a non-compliance. All right. Now, when we say non-compliance of what? So non-compliance of 2 things. One is non-compliance on spending the minimum amount of 2%. So if a company fails to spend the 2% that it was supposed to spend. And the second scenario is when the company has not transferred the amount that it was supposed to transfer either to the scheduled bank account or to the fund specified in Schedule 7. Now, in this case, what happens is there's penalty. Penalty on whom? Penalty on company as well as every officer who's in default. So we have the quantum of penalty that is to be levied. In case of a company, it is lower of 2 times the amount that was to be transferred, or 1 crore. And in case of the officers of the company, every officer who's in default will be liable to pay 10% of the amount to be transferred, or rupees 2 lakh, whichever is lower. Now, couple of points over here I would like to share. First is that this is a welcome step, because earlier there used to be imprisonment and, to the extent of 3 years and so on, if a company or officer was found to be in default. That has been done away with, which is very good. And now one other change that has been seen is earlier there were no penal provisions. So it was COREX, so comply or explain. But now there has been a shift from COREX to COPP, which is comply or pay penalty. Next, please. Right. So let us have a look at what are the board's responsibilities in this. Right. So board is the most important stakeholder when it comes to implementation of CSR activities. Now, these are just some of the key roles and responsibilities we've highlighted. It doesn't necessarily include or it's not necessarily restricted only to these. Now, of course, one board is responsible for formation of the CSR committee. It is responsible for approval of the CSR policy, which the CSR committee will form or draft. The board has to ensure, or the board is responsible for ensuring that all the activities that are undertaken are in accordance or within the purview of Section 135. And it is also responsible for ensuring that the funds are utilized appropriately and for the manner for which they were disbursed to the implementing partner. Right. In addition, it has to see that the timelines are being met and variance, if any, has been justified. Besides this, like we saw in the previous slide, that if there is any set off which is proposed to be, if there's any surplus which is proposed to be set off, the board needs to pass a resolution for that. And in case there is a failure on the part of the company to spend 2% of its net profit, then the company has to disclose the reasons for such non-compliance. In addition to this, the board also has to ensure that the company's website has a link wherein details of the CSR work that the company is doing, right, has been highlighted. So most of the companies who are obligated or who have to undertake CSR activities, you will find on their website, there's be a link related to CSR, and details such as the composition of the CSR committee, the company CSR policy, and what are the ongoing projects that the company has taken. All such details will be hosted on the website under that tab. Right. Now, let us look at the CSR reporting requirement. This has been covered by Rule 8 of the company CSR Rules 2014. Now, again, this is just some of the points we've covered. It is not an exhaustive list. So the reporting requirements is twofold. One is about quantitative information and the other is qualitative information, right? So when we talk about the qualitative information, that is the non-financial information. So, the key heads or the key details that the company should cover is the CSR policy, the link to the website which I just talked about, which should have all the details pertaining to the company's CSR, the composition of the CSR committee, impact assessment, if any, which the company has taken, all right, and the findings of such impact assessment or the impact assessment report. And when we talk of the financial inclusion that has to be there in the report, of course, the amount of CSR obligation, the average net profits of the company of the past 3 years. If there is surplus from any program, that has to be specified. If there is a shortfall, that has to be mentioned. If there are any admin overheads incurred by the company, that has to be mentioned. Now, it is important to note over here that admin overhead specifically need to be disclosed because there is a cap on how much admin overhead a company can incur. So a company cannot exceed more than 5% of the CSR budget of the current year or rupees 50 lakh, whichever is less, towards its admin cost. Next, please. Okay, now there's some additional reporting requirement for companies who have a bigger CSR obligation, right? So companies who have an average CSR obligation in excess or equal to rupees 10 crores in the 3 immediately preceding financial years have to undertake impact assessment through an independent agency, right? Such an impact assessment has to be undertaken through an independent agency. Now again, dual criteria has to be fulfilled. One, of course, is that even though the total budget is exceeding rupees 10 crores, only those programs, right, whose individual outlay has been greater than 1 crore, for those projects only we will have to undertake impact assessment. And secondly, a period of more than 1 year should have lapsed from the time the program had been completed to the date on which the impact assessment is being conducted. So it's important that both the criteria be met. It's not either or. And most importantly, the impact assessment report has to be placed before the board, and it will be forming part of the annual report on CSR. Next, please. Okay. Now, one important thing to note over here is the involvement of international organization. Now, one query that even we received, while we were having submissions for the webinar was that can we appoint a foreign body or an international organization to undertake CSR activities? The answer is no. Had it been so, we would have covered it in our earlier slides where we said that the company can do it either through its own foundation or in collaboration with other company. However, there is still some role that an international organization can play. So there are 2 activities for which a company can appoint an international organization. First is for the designing, monitoring, and evaluation of its program, like we just saw in the previous slide, right? So where a company is mandated to undertake that, they can appoint an international organization. And the second is for the capacity building of its own CSR staff. Okay, so these are the 2 activities only for which an international organization should be appointed. Again, one catch over here, the amount that is paid to the CSR, to the implementing body or the foreign organization or international organization, that will qualify as, that will be included in the total admin cost of the company, right? What we just discussed, that the total admin cost of the company should not exceed 5%. So this fees or remuneration that will be paid to such a body will also form part of our admin overheads. Now, let us look at the role of government in CSR and CSR monitoring more importantly. Now, the whole purpose of having these CSR laws and all was to ensure that the companies take up and fulfill their CSR obligations, right? So per se, in terms of monitoring of CSR activities, the government has no role to play. The onus is on the company's board. The company's board has the full authority to decide all aspects of CSR. What are the type of activities they wish to undertake? What is the location where they want to undertake the program? What should be the duration? All these onus, the entire decision-making power is with the board, right? And for this, like we've seen, the board may take help of external experts to assist them with the CSR activities. Now, the only control that the government has kept over here is they have implemented laws for mandatory disclosure of the CSR amount, as well as now they've introduced penal provisions for non-compliance. Next, please.
Thank you, Nishant, for explaining what CSR is in a simplified manner, how it has evolved in India over the years, and most importantly, the rules governing CSR in India. Now, moving on, a high-level committee was set up in 2015 to review the CSR regulatory framework. This committee had recommended that another committee be set up after 3 years to revisit the CSR framework. Then, in 2018, another high-level committee was set up under the chairmanship of Mr. Injeti Srinivas to review the framework and make recommendations to make it more robust. I will be covering the key findings of the report submitted by the high-level committee in August 2019. This will give us an idea of how companies complied with the CSR rules from FY15 to FY18. Okay, now this table highlights the status of compliance in terms of the CSR expenditure as a percentage of the prescribed CSR for all companies for each financial year. It can be seen in column D that the compliance in terms of percentage has been moderate, except for FY16, when it was quite high and the compliance percentage shot up to 85% from 59% in FY15. In the subsequent years, however, the compliance percentage has decreased. Now, there's a lot of data in this table. Basically, the table gives a clear picture of the number of liable companies reporting on CSR. It can be seen in row A that a majority of the companies have incurred zero CSR expenditure. However, this number of liable companies having zero CSR expenditure has decreased from 2950 in FY15 to 2583 in FY18. Please refer row A2. Another notable observation is that the number of companies with CSR spending more than the prescribed amount has increased from 1611 in FY15 to 4103 in FY18. You may refer row D. In this graph, the orange line indicates the total CSR expenditure in the year, and the blue bars indicate the percentage of companies having positive CSR expenditure in that year. Now, it can be seen that 45% of the liable companies are reporting on CSR in FY15 and contributing around 10,000 crore rupees. Now, this percentage has increased over the years to 71% for FY18. Hence, it may be inferred that even though the amount of CSR expenditure may be moderate, the culture of being responsible towards society is being adopted by more and more number of companies. Now, let's see what are the reasons for non-compliance. As Nishant mentioned earlier, the board of the company is required to give reasons for non-compliance with the CSR provisions in the director's report if CSR is applicable to that company. Now, the high-level committee noted that even after 5 years of making CSR mandatory, companies continued to cite delay in project identification, delay in implementation plan, and lack of prior expertise as the key reasons for not incurring the prescribed CSR expenditure. The committee has also stated that merely giving reasons for not spending is not sufficient, and the companies must express the intent to spend the stipulated CSR amount. So the explanation for not incurring CSR expenditure, despite being eligible, must be substantive or due to unavoidable circumstances. In one of the earlier slides, Nishant had covered the various modes available to companies for discharging their CSR obligations. Now, in this slide, we have covered how companies complying with CSR norms actually implemented their CSR projects between FY15 and FY18. Now, as can be seen, maximum projects are implemented through other implementing agencies, followed by projects directly implemented by the company. Now, projects implemented by trusts or societies set up by the company itself are lower than these two modes. Now, implementing agencies are an obvious and convenient choice for companies for CSR project execution due to their presence in the target areas, knowledge of the community and community connect, and most importantly, experience in executing projects which the corporates and the companies might lack. The least used mode is contribution to trust or society or Section 8 companies set up by the central or state government. Just wanted to check, Nishant, my video, you can see my video, right? Yeah, okay. Okay, moving on. Let's see what the sector-wise distribution of CSR funds looks like. Now, out of the total expenditure incurred on the Schedule 7 areas, education and health have received the maximum CSR funds. Now, fortunately, we can see a steady increase in the contribution to the environment sector over the years. Also, it is important to note that the contribution of funds set up by the central government, like the PM National Relief Fund and the Swachh Bharat Kosh, exceeds the contribution to other areas like art and culture, slum area development, and in fact, even women empowerment. Now, this slide is a more simplified version of the earlier sector-wise bar graph that we saw. Health and education have been the pet causes for companies, whereas slum development and other sectors like technology incubator, benefits to armed forces have received almost 0% CSR contribution. Now, luckily for us, we have gotten an opportunity to work with donors who understand the gravity of supporting, sensitive areas like women menstrual hygiene management, alternate livelihood opportunities for sex workers, and in fact, even prevention of child sexual abuse. Now, let's see what is the geographical distribution of CSR funds. Now, Section 135 states that the company shall give preference to the local area and the areas around where it operates for spending the CSR amount. As a result, a lion's share of the total CSR funds is getting distributed to a few states. And this draws attention to the role this provision might be playing in increasing the skew of the CSR expenditure across states. So let me clarify that it is not mandatory to incur CSR expenditure in the local area of the company. We can see that states like Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, and Delhi have received approximately 40% of the total CSR expenditure, whereas the northeastern region has barely received 1.5% due to infrastructural gaps. Now, so far, we've discussed what CSR is and where India stands in terms of adhering to CSR rules. Now, let's see what the global scenario is. So at the global level, 17 Sustainable Development Goals were adopted on 25th September 2015 by 193 member states of the United Nations to end poverty, protect the planet, fight inequality and injustice, and ensure prosperity for all as a new sustainable development agenda. The 17 goals, which consist of 169 targets, have to be achieved by 2030. Here's a list of all the UN SDG, the 17 UN SDGs. If you recall, in one of our earlier slides, we had covered how each of the areas covered under the Schedule 6 of the Companies Act can actually be mapped to multiple SDGs simultaneously. Now, India has played an integral role in the formation and evolution of SDGs and is committed to its achievement. The progress of the world to meet the SDGs actually largely depends on India's progress, since India's population is around 17% of the world population. Now, what are the steps that we have taken? Niti Aayog is the coordinating agency for implementation of SDGs in India, and it released the baseline report for the SDG India Index in 2019. Now let's see what are the findings of this report. As can be seen from the table, Kerala and Himachal Pradesh are the front runners with an SDG India Index score of 69, and among the union territories, Chandigarh scored the highest. Kerala's top rank is attributed to its superior performance in reducing hunger, achieving gender equality, and providing quality education. Himachal Pradesh ranks high on providing clean water and sanitation, reducing inequalities, and most importantly, preserving the mountain ecosystem. Chandigarh takes the lead because it has made good progress towards providing clean water and sanitation, affordable housing, and quality education. Now, India needs to make large investments for achieving the SDG 17s by 2030. And this may not be possible with government initiatives alone. It needs a more collaborative approach between the government, the private sector, and the civil society at large. In fact, this is what goal number 17 is, which is partnerships for the goals. Now, interestingly, SDGs and the Indian CSR laws were formulated and implemented around the same time. In fact, we have discussed how the areas, under Schedule 7 of the Companies Act 2013 can be mapped to multiple SDGs simultaneously. So companies in India need to realize that they will play a crucial role in achieving the SDGs, and how efficient planning and implementation of CSR projects can help India achieve the goals by 2030. This, of course, needs to be supported by good policy implementation strategies adopted by the government. So businesses across the globe need to identify their role in achieving the SDGs, not just in India. But what's in it for? What's in it for them? One, consistency and comparability. The adoption of SDG in CSR reporting brings about consistency across the private sector and enables easy comparison across companies, not just at the national level, but also with its global peers. Two, scope for sector-specific contribution. So SDG mapping brings about a unique opportunity for businesses to strategically align their CSR projects, not just to their business, but also address the specific issues faced by their industry. And the third one is investor interests. Now, investors are considering environment, social, and governance, that is ESG factors, to be as important as the financial health of the company. A company's CSR reporting with SDG mapping indicates to the investors that the company has a more forward-looking approach. In fact, some companies in India have already started to map SDGs relevant to their CSR projects and are slowly moving towards setting targets and measuring their contribution towards the same. So I have covered where India stands in terms of compliance to CSR rules, and how CSR projects, if properly planned and implemented, can help us achieve the SDG 17. Now, Nishant will cover how Help Your NGO can help you in your CSR activities via our advisory services. Over to you, Nishant.
Thank you, Vinny. Can we have the next slide, please? Right. So here we'll be quickly just highlighting our CSR advisory process that we follow for our corporate clients. It is a 4-step procedure. The first step is soliciting and evaluating funding proposal. Now, this usually starts with meeting the client and understanding what their requirement is, right? So, and based on that, we form a CSR strategy. So, when we say understanding the requirement, it is in the nature of what is the sector they are looking at supporting, what is the geographic location they have in mind, what is the period that they're looking at for supporting the program, what is the extent of involvement they wish to have with the program, what's the level of employee engagement that they wish to have, right? So once we have a very clear idea on this, we help the company form a CSR strategy or a giving strategy. And based on that, we reach out to our pool of non-profits, right? So we have 650 plus non-profits spread out across India, and we reach out to non-profits seeking a proposal for them based on the specific needs of the client. Now, a proposal would usually, cover factors such as the need for the program in that location, or who would be the target beneficiaries, how is the program going to create some tangible benefit to the beneficiaries over there, or how are the lives of the beneficiary going to improve by the contribution that the company is going to make, what is the implementation methodology, are there any success stories or past record that can be banked upon. So these are all the quantitative, qualitative part. In terms of the quantitative part, we will also have a detailed line item wise budget, variance analysis, if any, how has the budget been forecasted, and so on. Once we receive the proposal is then thoroughly vetted by Help Your NGO. We have a team of research analysts who then vet the proposal, right? And when we vet the proposal, of course, 2 factors have to be considered. One is the proposal should align with the organization's giving strategy. And second point is that they should also meet Help Your NGO's due diligence criteria. Right. So when we say our due diligence criteria is that we go in detail not in details with respect to the organization as well as the program. So say details like whether the necessary documents are in place, timely compliances, filing of reports, FCRA compliance, and so on. What is the financial spend, right? What Vinny just mentioned at the beginning, the percentage spend on beneficiary, how high is the ratio and how much is going towards overhead? What is the program overview? What is the outcome that we can expect? And so on. Based on that, we share a proposal with our donor, and he then finalizes what is the program or programs that he wishes to support. Right? Once that has been done, we facilitate in the grant disbursal process, and we also assist corporates in entering into an MOU with the implementing partner. Besides this, if the donor also wishes to visit the client, visit the program site, we also arrange for a field visit for the same. Thereafter comes the last step, which is the most important one also, with respect to monitoring and evaluation. So Help Your NGO's team is in constant touch with all our implementing partners, right? So all the NGOs who are associated with us, who are undertaking some or the other work for our donors, our team is in touch with them. And there's an ongoing monitoring and a periodic evaluation which happens. Now, based on the reports that we receive or the feedback that we receive, we share periodic reports with our clients, right? Both qualitative as well as quantitative. That also includes an audited fund utilization statement. Now, besides this, we also undertake due diligence activities on behalf of our donors. Now, let us look at what are the advisory services that we offer to our non-profit partners. One, of course, is proposal writing. So this again has gained, there's been a high demand for this, especially over the past 8 to 12 months with respect to the COVID and, with that, amount spent on COVID-19 qualifying as CSR and all that. With respect to that, thereafter we also assist NGOs with respect to the facilitation of the grants and also in respect of reporting. Next slide, please. Now, here's a brief overview of some of the programs that have been supported by our clients or are being supported by our clients. One of our clients had assisted in a sanitation programs, helping make several villages 100% open defecation free. We had another donor who had supported a program in rural Rajasthan addressing the issue of menstrual hygiene management, which is still a taboo and is not spoken about openly in many parts of India. One other donor had supported a Tech on Wheels program, which is nothing but a mobile lab imparting digital literacy to students, especially night school students. And we also had a donor who was desirous of offsetting his carbon footprint and had planted in excess of 20,000 trees, again in a village in rural Maharashtra. So these are just some of the programs that have been supported by our donors. We, of course, have many more programs that have been supported over the years. Now, based on our experience, here's what we would like to summarize by saying that this is what we feel is what corporates look for in a CSR partner. Right. So first step, of course, is the compliances with the relevant laws and the credentials. When we say credentials, it always helps when there's a certification in place or if the non-profit has been empaneled with any national level CSR hub or organization. Thereafter, the capabilities, expertise, and experience of the implementing partner is important. Who are the driving force or the people behind the organization, the key management, the trustees. Thereafter, the presence and reach, right? When you just mentioned, it is important to have someone who is associated with the community, who has a community connect. That part is very relevant. Leveraging the skills and resources, and most importantly, complying with the project deliverables in terms of timeline and in terms of achieving the objectives. Now, since we have access to both sides of the table, that is, we are associated with non-NGOs also, as well as corporates. Here's what we think what makes a CSR project successful. Right, so planning is the most important part. A well-planned program is required. Usually a CSR project has a commitment of at least 3 to 5 years. So the program needs to be, or the project needs to be broken down into short-term, measurable, achievable goals, and that has to be done in the planning stage itself. Thereafter, the implementation strategy, the transparency and open communication between the non-profit and the and the donor is important. The community ownership and sustainability plan. This is very important because the donor is not going to perpetually continue supporting any NGO. It is similar to the philosophy of, say, you give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. But if you teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And last, but most important one is the monitoring and evaluation, how effectively the program is being monitored and evaluated by the implementing partner. So to summarize, I would just say that corporates need to realize that no business will be successful if the society in which it operates fails. So we need to work hand in hand. The company needs to work along in its ecosystem and ensure that it is working on the sustainable development of the society at large.
Thank you, Nishant, for summarizing that for us. Now let's proceed to the last leg of our webinar, which is a Q&A session. We hardly have a minute to go. So, I mean, we've received a lot of questions from the attendees and I've already selected a few. So let me quickly get to it. Nishant, who takes a view on whether the proposed spending is eligible for CSR or not?
Right. So we need broad parameters have been given in Schedule 7 of the Companies Act, right? So it is ultimately at the discretion of the board. If the board is convinced that the program or project they're undertaking qualifies as one of the activities which are mentioned over there, then it is completely at the discretion of the board. So there is no approval required either from MC or any other authority to proceed with supporting a program.
Okay, there's one question on the role of SSE, which is the Social Stock Exchange in CSR. I can quickly take this one. So the question is, what is going to be the role of SSE in CSR? And I would say that SSE has a potential to actually change the whole CSR scenario in India. The working group has made recommendations like permitting trading of CSR funds using CSR certificates, which is a complicated proposition according to me. But another recommendation is allowing 100% tax exemption to all donors donating via the SSE. Now, this would actually be a noteworthy incentive for corporates to comply with CSR rules and donate via SSE. So, in the future, if when SSE actually goes live, there is a possibility that there'll be a lot of corporates adhering to CSR rules to claim that tax exemption. Okay, we're running out of time, so we'll have to end the Q&A here. Thank you all for joining us today, and I hope that this session helped you learn what CSR is, the rules governing CSR, where India stands, and why linking CSR to SDGs is essential. We've tried to answer a couple of questions since we were running short of time, but in case you have any question and your question wasn't answered, please feel free to write to info@helpyourngo.com. Special thanks to Quantum team for assisting us in hosting this webinar. It's been an absolute pleasure being with all of you today. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.